Okay, going. Wow, a lot of cameras here. Okay, fly. Good, good.
Okay, fly's good, yep.
Okay, good. And then we are doing, okay. All right, are you ready?
We're ready.
All right. Hi, I'm Jolene Jang, and we are here at the headquarters of Concur here in Bellevue, Redmond. And this is another interview with Startup Bellevue. And I'm here with Rajiv Singh. He said I could say Raj.
You can say Raj. It's okay.
Nice. So he is the co-founder and COO and president of Concur.
That's right.
So can you give us a snapshot of your some of the stats that people will be wowed by?
Sure. Concur is, it's kind of cool that we're still a startup, but we're 21 years old.
Start up my foot.
So, all the founders of the company are still here. We're 21 years later, and we're about 4,000 employees, right around there. We're all over the world. We've got operations in 20 plus countries. Those 4,000 employees are spread out across all those countries. We've got about 1,000 here in Bellevue, or right around that range. And we've got about now 25,000 or so. You can't quote me on the exact number, but about 25,000 customers. And the cool thing is, because our software touches every employee inside of a company, we've got, call it 25 million people who use our software once a month to book travel, fill out expense reports.
Startup, whatever.
Yeah, kind of startup-ish still. I mean, but here's the joy. We're still in it every day, cranking away because we really love what we do, and we still feel incredibly entrepreneurial about the idea that we can change the direction of our business, do what we think is right, and think long-term about building something great, because that startup mentality still exists inside the company.
So take us back to 1993 when you started.
Oops, excuse me. Yeah, 1993.
So you and your older brother Steve started the company Concur.
Actually, it was Mike Hilton, myself, and my older brother Steve. That's right.
Okay, great. And so, but I understand you started at Ford Motor in Detroit?
Yeah, I grew up in Michigan.
Okay.
Went to school, studied engineering, studied manufacturing engineering, which is super useful in the software industry. And then decided after a year, I worked at GM all through college. And then thought, well, I didn't really like it there. Not that there's anything wrong with GM. And so then I decided, well, I'll try something new. So I went to work at Ford. I did that for a year after I graduated and realized that I just couldn't work in a big company anymore. Luckily for me, my brother Steve and his good friend Mike were just about to leave their last company and thinking about a startup. And so they thought about a startup that Mike and I decided we would kickstart. I moved from Michigan.
And that was before Kickstarter.
That was before.
Way before.
Nice
okay.
Move and
yeah.
the Kickstarter reference.
Yeah.
Nice. We decided we'd give it a go. And so my brother was stuck in a job where he was kind of locked up for a couple of years based on the contract. And so Mike and I moved to Seattle. I came from Michigan via San Francisco. On a whim, really. We decided Seattle after a trip up here. We looked around and thought, wow, this place is cool. We're moving.
Ooh, wow.
Right. I mean, who doesn't love Seattle, especially after this summer? So we moved up to Seattle and moved into my apartment, and we worked in my apartment we worked and lived in my apartment for about 7 months. Mike, somewhere in there, got married, which makes his wife pretty cool. Like, she didn't move into the apartment though; she was smart.
Okay, good.
She made him move out.
So, but your transition from Ford, from big company to entrepreneur, how were you influenced by entrepreneurs, or how did you make that move? What drove you to, like, I can't do this big company?
You know what? It's I don't think I've ever answered this question this way, but I've thought about the question more lately. My father's an Indian immigrant. Came to the United States in 1965, and is smarter than I'll ever be. So, like, just crazy brilliant guy. And he worked in a big company, and he's this Indian guy with an Indian accent working in the heart of the Midwest. And he got up to a certain level in his business and stopped.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying there was any sort of nefarious motive, but I'm saying that guy's the smartest guy I've ever met. And he got to a certain spot, and his progress stopped because he wasn't a political guy, because he didn't play golf, because he didn't do all the stuff that you've got to do in a huge company to make it. And one thing he used to tell us all as kids is, if you have a chance to don't rely on somebody else. Rely on yourself. And if you can rely on yourself, you can do it on your own merits as opposed to on all the things that were outside of your control. I think no doubt that lesson stuck with me, and maybe more the result of his actions than his words. You know, a lot of times kids don't hear their parents' words, but they see what they do, and they see the results, and they think, okay, I can learn from that. And I know for a fact I learned a lot from my dad in that situation.
So were you always an entrepreneur, or?
I don't know. I guess like I had a
lemonade stand,
I had a paper route when I was 10. Detroit News. I was probably I would tell you, and I think the folks in my neighborhood who you could track down would tell you I was probably the best newspaper boy in that whole neighborhood.
Yeah.
I feel like I dominated that whole patch.
Nice.
And then I've been working ever since. 15 I was a busboy, 16 I was a waiter. Like I've been working ever since. I don't know that I had a bunch of businesses of my own, but I always thought that two things that I thought. One, if I have an opportunity to do something on my own, I'll do it. And two, I knew pretty early on, growing up in Michigan, that I needed to get to one of the coasts. That I had to get to the East Coast or the West Coast, but I had to get to a coast. And that it seemed like all of the cool, innovative ideas were coming from the coasts. And what I found, actually, not that you asked me this, but I'll tell you anyway.
Yes.
What I found when I got to the West Coast was that there was this incredible culture fusion happening here. And that I love the Midwest. I'm a kid from Michigan. I'll always be a kid from Michigan. But the cultural fusion that's happening on the coasts just changes the intellectual dialogue. It changes what people talk about. And if that's not happening where you live, you have to go find that, because great ideas don't come from a single individual just sitting thinking. It comes from a single individual who's processing all these ideas around them. And that's why the coasts are so brilliant.
West Coast.
Exactly.
So let's go back to 1993 and kind of move on. When you were in Seattle when you started Concur.
That's right.
So you're a minority and a startup. How did you build your network?
Well, actually, that's a really great point, because I was terrible at it. And it's hard. I was 23, I didn't know anyone. And we were working all the time.
Yeah.
So literally, we weren't exactly early risers, but we're up at 9 and we're working. And then we're working till 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. We were just constantly working because we were trying to ship our first product. And so in that situation, you don't network really. Like our life was basically work all the time, every once in a while, go to a sports bar and watch football. And so that was a mistake. That was a mistake we made early, which was we didn't spend enough time. I think Mike and I both would look back on that and say we could have spent more time getting to know the community. And so that probably didn't come until 6 or 7 years later, to be honest with you. Like we were so focused on building our company, and we thought, well, we can control it all. And what we should have known then that we do know now for sure, and it's part of the reason why we want to participate in stuff like Startup Bellevue is, man, there's a bunch of entrepreneurs who want to give back and who want to help you. And had we reached out, there probably would have been a bunch of guys who said, hey, you guys are doing some cool stuff, let us help. And certainly we feel that way now about young entrepreneurs, young or old entrepreneurs who want to get something started around here. We'd love to help.
You know? We got that on camera, right? On 3 cameras? Okay.
Yeah, totally, you did. That one's a gimme. Good. There's some great local organizations that are already doing great things for startups, but we'd love to help.
So in terms of now that you should have, a lot of the young startups are not, maybe don't know really how to build networks. What kind of advice do you have for them?
Well, locally now it's so much better. In San Francisco, there's tech meetups everywhere, right? In the Valley, there's tech meetups everywhere. Those are happening now here way more.
Right.
You just have to pay attention, and you'll see them and you'll find them, and you got to go. And you know what? This is interesting, because if you're an engineer and you're building a company, the idea of going to tech meetups or these social gatherings is uncomfortable. It's kind of weird. Like you go and you kind of walk over and you're shaking hands, like, hey, here's what I'm doing, and it's awkward.
Yeah.
But fight through the awkwardness. Go.
Okay, I think that's what people need to hear, because I am at those things and I don't quite fit in, and there's a lot of awkwards out there.
Nobody fits in. Nobody fits in. I mean, you walk up and you don't know anyone, and everyone's just standing there, and you tend to migrate to the one person you know, even if you kind of barely know them. You go right over to them. And what you really have to do is just take a moment, breathe deep, and say, there's a good story in here somewhere. that's going to either add value to my life because I learned something from the story, or somebody that I'm going to work with potentially because I find out that they know something that I want as a part of my business. Or maybe it's just going to be an interesting conversation. Here's the thing, you're going to go to 10 of those,
Yeah.
and 5 of them might suck.
Yeah.
But the 5 that add value are worth it for the other 5.
And so fight through is what I hear. Fight
suck
through.
it up and deal with it. You got
All right.
You got to do it. If you don't do it, you're disadvantaging your business. And so I'd go to those. There's some brilliant organizations like Chris DeVore at Founders Co-op is just one of the coolest guys on the planet, and what they're doing at Founders Co-op and Techstars is great stuff. And if you reach out to that guy, he's prone to link you to 15 people because it's just the nature of the way his business or his brain works. I think the guys at there's Alliance of Angels. There's a whole bunch of organizations that are really built around small business. Those guys are guys I'd reach out to as well.
So get out there, people. So get out there. So let's go back to partnering. I know that that's a big piece, at least from your website. It looks like a big piece. Partnering, you just joined up with Airbnb and Uber and
Right.
Starwood. And to join, what, the hundreds, thousands of partners that you have?
We have hundreds, I don't know, thousands, I guess. It could be thousands. I haven't counted them all up, but-
So a couple questions here. When did you learn the value of partnering? And how do you find the right partners?
Okay, the value of partnering, if you're running a company, well, whether you're running a company or whether you're just
Or
trying to run a
relationship,
business,
whatever it is,
whatever it is
yeah.
you're doing, the fundamental, I would say this is a principle of the internet, it's a principle of the cloud for sure, is innovation comes from all different sources. And that innovation, if you expect that all innovation that's going to serve your customer is going to come out of the 4 walls of your company, you're deluding yourself about what you're capable of. There's a component of the answer that you're capable of delivering, and you should be the best in the world at that component. That's how you're going to win. That's how you're going to beat your competition. There are components of the answer that have to come from others. And so the Uber relationship we just announced is a great example. Could we have built an app that helped people book taxis? I guess we could have, but why would we do that?
Yeah.
Why would we do that? There's a brilliant solution out there that the world loves. By the way, it's like one of the fastest growing companies in history. Airbnb, same story. Are we the best people in the world to build an application to help people do that work? No, we're not. But you know what we can do? We can make sure that if you book an Uber, that it automatically flows to your expense report, so you don't have to fill that out, so you don't have to deal with the hassle. That's looking at your customer and saying, hey, what is your customer doing outside of your app or your service? And those things that they're doing outside, is there some way to make that part of their life better by using the service that you're already providing? And so that's how we think about partnering. We think about partnering, we say, is there someone else or some other component of this total solution we're trying to provide the customer that's doing a great job of it, and we should go link up with them and figure out how to make that service even better for the customer. And by the way, customers, they kind of dig that, they love that. And so it makes you a more and more valuable component, even if all you're doing is a simple technology link. The Uber link is so cool because it's super simple. You buy, you pay, and when you pay, it says, do you want to send your receipts to Concur? You say yes, and it's done forever. That's pretty simple, but people love it.
So it sounds to me that to kind of reduce your ego, you're not the best at everything, but you're very good at what you do, and to let other people, that's what I'm kind of sorting out.
I think, there's one other principle that I think is really important. A lot of times people want to partner, and what they really mean is they want to go partner with somebody who's got a big sales force to help them sell their stuff. And what they really mean is they want them to do something for you.
Okay.
And so partnering means two-way, meaning you can't just ask somebody for something. You have to offer something. And so, and that offer has to be tangible. It has to mean something to the other guy. And so when you're sitting down to have a partnership discussion, it's pretty useful to stop, and before you start pitching what you want them to do, stop and say, hey, tell me about your objectives. Tell me how you get measured this year. Tell me what your company cares about. What are the 5 goals of your company? Because you have to find some way to align what you're doing with their objectives. And if you can do it, you have a chance. If you can't do it, then that guy's going to leave that meeting, and by and large, he's going to forget about you when he's gone. And so partnership is a two-way street. It has to be both. It can't be what value you need from them and not the other way around.
So in terms, let's say, oh, this looks like a good partner, you had a great meeting, you had a couple of meetings, do you have maybe a trial period, or let's say for our startups who are pretty new and they're not necessarily new with partnerships, what can you suggest for them when they're trying out a partnership?
Here's the thing. every partnership, there are very few partnerships that just start off and take off, you know?
Yeah.
And so there's a tendency to want immediate results or quit and start
Yeah,
something new.
yeah, of course, right.
You have to be willing to invest, which is why, in my opinion, you don't do 50 partnerships. There are guys who love to write press releases, and they do partnerships, and then they do nothing about them because the press release is cool and it gets them some magazine mentions. But magazine mentions don't necessarily sell software or whatever it is you're trying to sell. What sells is value, and so don't do 50 relationships. Pick 2 or 3 that are really going to materially matter. Invest in them, and we're talking about startups, and I'm thinking about technology. Invest in them means engineering time. Build stuff that adds tangible value to your customer, and try. And it might not take off right away. But if it's strategic and it makes sense to the partner and it makes sense to you, you'll figure it out. But you do 50 relationships and try to sort of pretend that you're going to do integration work with all of them, and you're not going to do any of it.
Well, it's kind of like friends. I mean, if you have 50 best friends, it's hard to.
Well, for most people, I have 50 best friends, but I'm just super compelling though.
Super nice. So
no, I don't have 50 best friends, by the way. I don't. No one does. Go ahead.
So in terms of, you've been in business for 21 years, right?
Right. Can you imagine?
Yeah, I've been at 19. 18! Woo!
Really? You look so much younger than me.
Yeah, I think you've accumulated a little bit more money than I have, perhaps. But
can't be sure.
Yeah. So how do you know when you're going in the right direction or wrong direction? And how can we learn from some of your mistakes? So we don't have to make them.
Direction is a day-to-day affair, meaning I don't think you wake up one day and say, oh my God, I've been doing the wrong thing for 7 months. If you do that, then somewhere in that 7-month period, you were supposed to be double checking your direction. I think what I talk about a lot, what we talk about a lot inside these 4 walls of Concur, is try stuff and fail. And you're gonna learn pretty quickly whether it's working or not. And so, and you know whether you're failing by measuring. I know this sounds super pedantic and simple, but it's the reality. Try stuff, measure it, and if it fails, try something new. I'd say, if directionally speaking, for startups, there's this pivot point that people talk about where, like, oh, you know what, I'm working on a particular idea, and I need to change that idea, and I need to pivot my business. That's how people like to talk about it. What they mean ultimately is I'm restarting. I got to start try something new.
Pivot.
And so, which is cool. Like you got to do that.
Yeah.
And you know, our business pivoted 4 times, 5 times. We're in the midst of another pivot, and it's super cool. You're supposed to. That's not being wrong directionally. It's heading in a direction, learning and adjusting. And you know, I don't recommend anyone stop and go back. I recommend that you look and say, okay, what have I learned? And based on what I've learned, how do I adjust? And you're adjusting every single day. And if you're a really smart entrepreneur, you're adjusting based on what you've heard from your customer. So how do you know when you're going in the wrong direction? When no one wants to buy what you're selling, and when your customer is not finding the value that you expected from it. And so what you're constantly doing is listening to the market and adjusting and adjusting. Unless you're super brilliant, unless you're Steve Jobs, and you don't have to listen to the market because you're just going to build something that everybody loves and you don't have to wait and listen. By the way, I think there was one Steve Jobs. You know, the rest of us have to study, we have to learn, and we have to listen to the market and figure it out. You know, I think there are a few of us who have a sort of a feeling that, well, don't worry, I don't have to listen to the customer because I know everything they want. That's not the way it works.
So what I'm hearing is listen a lot to what people are saying, as well as don't be afraid to fail.
That's right. You have to fail. We failed so many times here at so many different things.
You just had to hit at some point. So.
And you have to. I mean, the reality is, failure is, and man, this is something I so passionately believe in. Failure is your best teacher. It's the #1 teacher. If you're not failing, you're probably not going anywhere. And you might be happy. You might be sort of deluding yourself that you're making progress. But if you're not failing, if you're not trying stuff that doesn't work all the time, you're probably not making progress. Sweet.
That is a good lesson. So in terms of, that's a good teacher. What are other role models? There was your dad, was your role model. What are other role models?
You know, I think role models, and I think of, you know, they come from all walks of life. But I love these stories of guys who fall and come back.
Yeah.
You know, and so I love the comeback story of people who have struggled. What was that movie? The guy who had to cut off his own arm to come. What was the name of that movie? Was it 24 Hours? Was it 28 Hours? I don't know the name.
I don't know.
James Franco. It was pretty good. I've forgotten it now. But I love a great comeback story. I love great sports comeback stories. I love business comeback stories. And especially I love stories that aren't about individuals, but that are about groups. I think the really cool thing about Concur is that this is 4,000 people in it to do it together. Like, there's no cult of personality here. There's not a guy who is everything here. There's not a group of guys. It's not the founders and everybody else. It's not that kind of band. It's all of us in it together. And those group stories are way more meaningful to me because there is no one person who makes it all happen. There's a group of people who do it together.
So in terms of the culture of your company, when you started out, before you started growing like crazy, what's the culture? What was really important to make sure that you kept a certain part of your culture? What is that?
You know, we started writing it down. One, we said, this is who we are. This is who we are. This is what we believe in. And that was a big step. You know, when I was 23, when we started the company, if you'd asked me to write down our values and like put down our mission statement or some crap like that, I would have laughed. I'd said, like, this is the dumbest thing ever. I saw that at Ford and nobody cared about what that said.
Yeah.
I shouldn't be so mean to Ford. There's going to be like a guy from Ford watching this. And it's a great company today. But we thought by the time, like, we'd been through some rocky spots as a company, by the time we got through those rocky spots, we thought, okay, if we're going to build this company, we're really going to get a chance to build it and be great. We're going to make absolutely certain that from this point forward, we bring on people who believe the same stuff we do. They don't have to think the same way. They could be left brain, they could be right brain, they could be from one school of engineering versus another school of engineering, or this kind of marketer versus that kind of marketer. It's not about thinking the same thing. It's about believing value-wise in the same stuff. Are you a team guy, or are you an individual superstar? Like, are you a guy who wants to be on the cover of the magazine, or do you want to be in with a team in a team photo? Like, what do you want? Because if you're a collaborative team guy who thinks you can actually work at a place where you're nice to your colleagues but still can disagree, where you might actually really care about the people you work with, even when you've got these insane aggressive goals, then you're our kind of guy. And guys unisex, could be girl, could be boy. You're our kind of guy. If you're the one who needs to be the loudest voice in the conference room, we don't care how massive your IQ is or how much you make in terms of delivering sales quota. We don't want you.
Okay. So by the way, I think I was looking. I think they're hiring 241 employees. So.
Yeah, that's a good number.
Yeah.
I mean, we're hiring
by the way,
a lot of people. We are hiring. Yeah. If you want a job, if you don't want to do your startup, come talk to us.
So in terms of in your 21 years, there must have been times where you were down at some point where you were like, oh my gosh, why don't I just work for another company?
Yeah. Never that. I never thought I should work for another company, no.
Well, how did you keep motivated to like, oh gosh, I feel like we're getting nowhere? How did you like get yourself?
There were hard days. For sure there were hard days.
Yeah.
But I think you got to be a little crazy, don't you? If you're going to start your own company.
Yeah, a little bit.
You're nutso, right? You're a little crazy. And so, and that craziness has to lead to at some level, like at some point you have to acknowledge that maybe it's not going to work. But at some level, you have to be crazy enough to think, I know that it looks like I'm going to fail, but I'm not going to. We'll figure it out. And all of the people who are starting their own business, who are watching this video, they're already strange, right? They're a little weird, and they believe that about themselves, and that's cool, because we did. Then there's going to be days, like there was a day when we'd already become a public company, and our stock went to 30 cents. 30 cents, like, man, that is a crap company, a 30-cent stock, and those were glum days. But you know what? We had this. It's a good story. There was a story that was published in the Wall Street Journal that, like, 2 days after, that said, it wasn't about us. It was about all these tech companies with stock below $1, and it said 95% or whatever it was of companies that go below $1 and don't survive. And we cut that article out. We put it up in the kitchen of our old office.
Yeah.
And we said, we're going to be the 1%. That's going to be us. And those are motivational. That's how you fight through it. Like, there are days where it hurts. Find a way to suck it up and keep going. You got to keep trying.
All right, just suck it up.
You've been called twice now.
All right.
Yeah. So
let me go chat with her, and then I'll because we still have one more to do, right?
well, the thing is, if she has a meeting for you, we can do it round 2 if you'd like.
Let me come right back.
I was just going to ask two things. Why don't you take some pictures?
Yeah, I want to get one, each time we do this.
Yeah.
For me, I'd like to get a
Yep.
couple. Can I-
Yep. Take some pictures from this side. And let me ask two
What do you think, more minutes?
questions.
No, we're good. We're good.
Okay.
We can go till 1/2 past. She'll move it to 3:30 instead of 3, and we'll go.
Okay, cool.
Is it still going? Okay, that's still going. Okay, this is pretty cool setup with my little cheat sheet. And I'm not moving my face because,
No.
so that's why I'm a little bit statuesque. But let's see, let's talk about, I understand from the reading I did that you're into goal planning.
I am.
Can you tell us some tips for the startups? Like, what's different about your goal planning, or what's so important, or why you must?
Man, I think you just have to write stuff down.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't, I don't think there's a particular methodology of
Yeah.
planning that is better than another methodology. I think just like you can use multiple, everybody's definition of agile development is a little bit different depending upon what company you go talk to. There's multiple different ways to get to an answer, but the most important principle here is have the courage to write down what you think you're going to achieve.
Yeah.
And by courage, I mean sometimes writing down bold goals seems kind of pompous, or it seems kind of crazy. You write it down and think, well, how can I ever do that? I promise you this, until you set the objective, you won't do it. And so set the objective and set milestones. And so we apply that. Obviously, we have a 4,000 person company now.
Yeah.
And we're a public company, and we got to hit our numbers every quarter and all that sort of stuff. And so our objectives are a little bit more granular now than they were when we were a startup in our apartment. But the thing we did do was say, you know what, within 2 years, this is where we're going to be. And we're going to be making this much money from a revenue perspective. We're going to sell this many versions of our software. We're going to have acquired funding to build out the next version of meaning we'd written down a plan. And some of it was stupid. Some of it, you look back, and we have them, and there's some sitting in my office.
In the little museum. Right.
No, they're sitting in my desk drawer still, really, to be honest. We need to build a museum. But you read it sometimes, and you kind of chuckle, like, man, what in the hell were you thinking? But it was useful. It was useful for us because it gave us a milestone marker to say, are we really doing what we said we'd do? Because it's easy, especially when it's just you and another guy, or just a few of you. It's easy to self-justify how you're not getting it done. It's easy to say, like, yeah, well, this happened, and so didn't come through on their end of this deal,
Yeah.
and therefore, it's not our fault.
Yeah.
We're doing the best we can. We're working really hard, but it's not our fault. But bullshit, it's always your fault. Like, it's your business. Like, you gotta either you're gonna do it or you're not. And holding yourself accountable is one of the first and most important parts of building your own business. You gotta be able to look yourself in the eye and say, am I getting it done or not?
And also share actually with other people that will help you hold accountable. I know that I've lost a little bit of discipline over the way, so make sure you share it with others as well. Last thing, tell us what we can expect from Concur, of what's coming up, what's new, what are you most excited about?
There's this we think that cloud companies are about to reinvent the way vertical industries work. And so let me explain what I mean, because that's a kind of jargonish statement. There are 25 million people who fill out expense reports and book travel using our software, about 25 million, say. Because we're in the cloud and because all that data is stored centrally, we're gathering all this incredible information about those travelers and about those companies. And when those travelers want to use that information to make their life better,
Yeah.
They're doing things like linking their Concur account to Uber. And so what does that mean? Well, over time, it means that when you land in San Francisco, you might get if you link your Concur account to Uber, you might get a text from Uber saying, hey, we know you're at baggage claim 3, and there's 2 Uber cars waiting on the other side of the median at baggage claim 3. Pop out, here's a license plate number of one of them if you want a car. How did we do that? Well, because we know your itinerary information, we know where you are, because you're using Concur Mobile, and you've decided to link your account. You could do the same thing, like when you go to the United Airlines website, where United knows that you're a frequent traveler, and they offer you all these free benefits, which they wouldn't have otherwise known unless they could look at all of your last 10 expense reports. All of those types of things are these incredible opportunities where it used to be companies like us would just provide travel and expense software to a company, and they'd buy it and they'd pay for it, and that's all we did.
Yeah.
Today, all of that information can make travelers' lives way, way better. we call that idea, like this idea of like, wouldn't it be cool if we could use all this data to make business travel perfect, to make a perfect trip?
Yes, I've seen those videos. Pretty cool, the perfect trip.
Exactly. And so we think we can do that. And that's cool. Like now you're not talking about, hey, we solve travel and expense reporting problems. Now you're saying, hey, can't we solve the misery of business travel? Because business travel for most people sucks. And that is, it's pretty easy to get fired up about the idea of making a $1 trillion industry way better.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. And by the way, so you own TripIt, is that right?
That's right.
Yeah, I didn't realize that. They own TripIt.
Yeah, TripIt it's a great app, isn't it?
Nice. And another thing that you may not know about Raj here is I was looking at Wikipedia. Were you a supermodel? Was that there's a supermodel?
Yeah, have you seen that? If you look up my name
Yeah.
on Google, there's this like super cool looking dude with the shirt off, just tall guy, ripped.
Yeah, it was him like a year ago, I think.
And I see it, and sometimes I'll show it to my wife. I'm like, that was me before I met
Yeah.
you.
Nice.
But then I became a startup guy and
Yeah.
drank a lot of beer. And
And then, yeah. Well, thank you so much. I
Thank you
appreciate
very
it.
much. Appreciate it.
Great. Okay, can you take a few pictures, like right now, and then we'll swabby swoo? Awesome job, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, just get one. I don't